So now over in this darkest area, I can use the bigger pieces of pastel just to suggest some of those leaves in there. And you can see the little part of the pastel that's being used to create these leaf shapes. Perfect for not getting too much detail. And if you rotate the angle of the pastel a little each time you make a mark, just try to keep it with no uniformity, nice random marks. Which I think is why I jump about a background a little, so that I don't get into any particular pattern or rhythm anywhere. But this stage can really only come after you've spent a while getting those dark layers down first. For these leaves to have any contrast against the background, you really have to get a lot of depth in there to begin with. And this is the common mistake in everything that we paint. It's the tendency to choose values that are too light. If you can start thinking of your colours in terms of how light or dark they are, and also how warm or cold they are. If you can start trying to analyse each colour you look at in that way, those are the main two things you use to analyse colour when you paint. And that's this top section almost done. Just a final few marks with my lightest value here. Just adding a few last highlights on the brightest area of that tree line. And now we're on to this hedge line, which is just behind the horse and rider. I decided in the photo reference to really try and zone in just on the horse and rider in that mid-ground. So the hedge, as it disappears from them, will have a little less detail than they do. But that piece of hedge just behind them should be pretty detailed, as it's pretty close to the plane of field that they are in. So like with the foliage, I've used my black to block in the darkest areas, and I come in with that same dark 7 to add more darkness and texture. The right hand side of the hedge is being lit, and that back corner beside the trees really does disappear into darkness. So my next value up, similar to the foliage, and I continue to dot in a lot more texture across the hedge line. The top row of the hedge has a lot of warmth across it. This is BE10, and here I'm just dotting in some of that top row of the hedge. I've already added in some RE10 behind this, and you can see the nice warmth of that against the greens behind. And now block in this little grassy area with green 32. I decide at this point as well that I'm going to include a grassy area below the path, that area on the bottom left corner. I think the foreground could do with more green to balance the painting nicely, so I'll show you both these areas of little patches of grass and how I build those up. But as always, searching for the darkest area, dotting in some texture roughly. And I continue with the dark 7, adding texture into that darkest area of the hedge. You don't have to add very much detail into the shadow areas. A few dots just to suggest some leaves as they disappear into the darkness. So now, starting with my yellow green earth 10, I can start to add a bit more detail to the top of the hedge. And you can see how I can turn the pastel to get smaller marks by using the edges of the bigger sticks. And this is BE8. Just bringing in some of those lighter brown earths for the very lightest highlights across the top of the hedge. And now my dots are pretty small and getting smaller as the hedge disappears away from us. So I come back to this grass area with some green 11. And you can see to the back of the grass area is in shadow, and it's really just this front area catching the light. And I can very simply add some texture in there, and without having to do very much more, that will be enough over there just to suggest how the light is hitting that little patch. Then with my lightest green highlight colour, this lovely light green tint, I start dotting in a little bit more texture, adding just a bit more texture out here where the light is hitting it, and a bit more texture directly under the horse where it's going to be more in focus. But you can see that you don't have to do a huge amount to a grassy area that's in the distance. And I just go around adding these final highlights to the hedge. And then just a final bit of darkening behind the hedge and the horse. Adding in a bit more texture back there. And making that contrast really nice between the hedge and the far distant background. And now a bit more work to this grass over here, as I realise that it needs to shine through the top of the foreground hedge. And so I block in a bit more of my base colour. And then go over this, adding some lighter marks of texture, using both the lighter greens and some of those light brown earths. I also use some BE25 here, or you can just use something yellowy, buttery colour. As I said before, it's good to add some warmer colours in throughout the grass. And this is broken up by that slightly mintier green again, green 5. So the last patch of grass that I can show you, and it's the one that's in the foreground closest to us. Now I decided to add some grass here. I think it helps the overall colour balance of the painting. And I'm just drawing on my memory of painting a lot of grass before and just using my common sense within this painting, judging how big my marks will need to be this close to me in the foreground. And I just use some of the green 32 and block in that area. At this stage I'm jumping around this foreground, and I'm not going to show you the build-up of all the logs, as that took a very long time, and it's not something I've ever had to paint before. So I think the grass and the foliage are things that I often have to paint, so it's a useful thing to show you. So at this stage I'm using that lighter green, just marking in some texture. You can see that the marks I'm using are slightly bigger here than in the grass in the background. But with the first couple of layers, I'm never too fussy. But even at that, it already starts to take the form of some grass. I think sometimes the more you try to paint each blade of grass, the less convincing it looks. I know it's something I've struggled with a lot in the past, and I find the more I loosen up and try to be random in my mark making, it seems to suit the grass and the foliage and landscapes in general. So it's a good exercise for anyone who works in a lot of detail or gets bogged down in small areas of detail. Getting into background painting, a bit of landscape painting, it has improved my work so much, but it has improved me as an artist overall, I would say. So even if it's something you find really difficult, I do recommend having a go at it and working at it. I promise it gets easier with time. So I continue to build up the texture until my top highlight here. And I'm using the photo reference to know that the light would only really be hitting this top part of the bank. So that's the only part that I add the highlight greens to. And just lastly, I want to show you a quick build up of the hedge in the foreground. So I've already shown you the whole hedge build up in the background. I'll not show you every section of this. But like before, I've used the black and the dark 7, and I'm just dotting in the darkest areas and creating the texture. My next value of green up, and I can go in between those dark marks that I made earlier and start to add the next layer of value. And you can already see that those begin to stand out from the dark tones behind. My next value up, and I'm working around the edges at the top, gently covering the area that overlaps the horse, and starting to bring some of those light tones further down the hedge. I'm using quite small marks here, always blending it really well together. And I really want the area that's closest to the horse to be most in focus. So this bottom right corner where I'm working now will be really blurry as it's closest to the viewer. Hopefully with that nice gradient of focus across the painting, it really draws the viewer's eye to the mid-ground where the rider and the horse are, my main focus of the whole painting. Really, all of this is just there to enhance them and set them off. So final few marks with a smaller shard of green pastel. Just adding a few smaller details around the bottom of the jump. And I hope you found this tutorial helpful. It's been a long one. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because what I keep hearing is that you want more real-time footage, and that means longer videos, which is fine with me, as the most difficult thing is actually to edit it down to 1 hour. So many of my paintings take so many hours to produce, and to show you all the techniques that I want to show you, it's very difficult to squeeze it into 1 hour. So if this is a better direction to go, please do let me know your thoughts. And another option would be to have no narration, but instead have my instructions come up written on the screen, or have them available to download and translate into another language. These are all other ideas I'm working on. Would you prefer to listen to other audio as you work? This is up to you. So over the next couple of tutorials, I hope to really hone their style and have them deliver exactly what it is you're looking for. So until next time, happy pasteling.